Good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Marty Ross, and this is another Conversations with Marty Ross MD. It's a webinar that we create together. You create with your questions, and each week we explore some different issues. Sometimes they're a little bit the same. Interesting enough, sometimes we actually get into a theme in the webinar without any planning on my part. So we'll see where tonight goes in terms of your questions. To the best of my ability, I'll answer those questions. Sometimes you stump me. Sometimes you give me new ideas to think about. So please ask your questions. Even if you're not certain it's a good question, ask them. We can all learn together from it. And sometimes the questions you bring to my attention here actually cause me to change how I might approach things as well, too. So it winds up being a good process both ways, and I look forward to that. The way that this webinar works, you get to create it by writing questions to me. And so over here on the bottom of the screen, right-hand side of the screen, I'll make sure you can see my hand here. On the bottom right-hand side of the screen, you'll see a chat box. You can write your question there. The only thing I ask is that you only hit the enter key one time while you're writing your question. That is when you're going to send it to me. If you actually wind up using the enter key before you send it to me, or intend to complete your whole question, it sends multiple questions my direction, and it gets to be really hard for me to follow as I'm trying to piece it together on this side. For those of you that are watching the live webinar tonight and you're not participating in one of the recorded versions, I will post those questions so you can actually see them on the screen. I will read them too, though, and that's because in the recorded versions, the screenshot that I show you during the live version doesn't show up, right? So I'll make sure that everyone is on the same page. Sometimes I have to read them twice, depending on what the information is about. So I am creating a recording of the webinar tonight, and tomorrow morning, somewhere around probably around 7:30 in the morning, you'll get an email from me saying that the recording is ready. If you happen to miss that email, there's multiple places you can find a recording of the webinar. Okay, number one, I post them on Facebook, so that's Treat Lyme or Facebook /Treat Lyme. Number two, you'll find it on the homepage of my Lyme disease information site, which is at treatlyme.net. You will also find it on the webinars page at treatlyme.net as well, too. Finally, you can also find it on my supplement store, which is Marty Ross MD Supplements at treatlyme.com. Yeah, so the supplement store is .com, and the Lyme disease information site ends in .net. Okay, so those are some places you can find it. And then finally, some of you follow me on my YouTube channel too, and this recording will be live there tomorrow morning as well. Okay. So that takes care of the business side. Oh, the only other thing from a business standpoint, this is going to be the last webinar for a couple weeks. Actually, I'll be off next week and the weekend after, or the week after that, but for various reasons. I'll probably let you know about those later in the webinar. So why don't we go ahead and get started? We'll take our first question here. Hello, Kit. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. An acquaintance of mine revealed to me she got bit by 3 ticks last year. She now has finger joint pain that her doctor told her is osteoarthritis. She is 30 years old. Also, when she eats eggs now, it itches where she got bit on her thighs. She doesn't know anything about Lyme or have the money for hygienics or a Lyme literate medical doctor. I was thinking of telling her to ask her doctor to prescribe 60 days of doxy just in case. What do you think? We're on the East Coast. So it's kind of a complicated question for me to answer because I would probably want to know a bit more than what you've told me. So just having joint pain does not necessarily mean Lyme, even if you've been bit by a tick. I would want to know probably before even recommending antibiotics that there are some other symptoms that might suggest Lyme. So things like fatigue, insomnia, body pain beyond just the joint pains, maybe some cognitive decline or thinking problems. But I would want to know more than probably what you've just told me. I want to ask some more questions. Yes, it is possible this is Lyme, but from what you're telling me, I can't say for sure because there are other things that can give joint pains, including osteoarthritis, although I agree with you. At 30, it might be a little bit young for a person to be displaying osteoarthritis. Osteoarthritis, everyone, is a type of arthritis that occurs in the joints when you wear down the cartilage that covers the bones in the joint, all right? And that usually is something we do as we get older, not at 30 years of age. But still, that's possible. So I guess if I knew there were a number of more symptoms suggesting Lyme, I might say yes. Doxycycline for 30 to 60 days sounds like a reasonable option, but I can't say for sure without knowing more about what's happening with this person. Keep in mind too that just yes, you're on the East Coast, and depending on which state you're in out there, there's higher prevalence of Lyme and the ticks than in others. So, for instance, in Jersey, I think New Jersey, the studies I've seen say maybe about 95% or more of ticks carry Lyme. That's not the case all the way up and down the East Coast. The other thing to keep in mind is just because you get bit by a tick that has Lyme doesn't mean you get Lyme disease, because our immune systems are designed to deal with germs, right? So it's possible that somebody gets a Lyme infection and that their immune system actually deals with it, and they don't wind up getting the illness that develops when the immune system can't get rid of the infection. Okay, so there's Lyme infection, meaning a germ is in you, your immune system deals with it. There's also Lyme disease, which is the mess that gets created if the immune system can't deal with it. Okay, all right. So anyhow, I hope that it gives you some insights there, Kit. Thank you for the question. Hello, Sherry. Sherry says, Dear Dr. Ross. And then I don't see the rest of the question there. So I hope we run into the rest of your question later here today, Sherry. Hello, Janet. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Marty. Thank you for these webinars. You're welcome. Is it possible to have Babesia without having Lyme? The answer is yeah, it is possible. It's possible to get Bartonella without having Lyme. It's possible to get any of the tick-borne infections and not necessarily have Lyme be transmitted at the same time. It took me 15 years of many chronic health issues to be diagnosed through IGeneX, which first stated my blood test was indeterminate with an IgM of positive 31, positive 41, and indeterminate 39, and the IgG was positive 41, indeterminate 39. So further testing of a FISH test was positive to show the parasites in my blood cells. I assume what you mean by the FISH test is the Babesia FISH test. FISH, everyone, stands for fluorescent in situ hybridization. It's a mouthful. What that means is that we use a fluorescing agent, something that fluoresces, that attaches to the genetic material of the germ so we can see it. Okay, so we can see it underneath the microscope. So it's a fancy microscope exam. And I think what you're telling me is that came back positive. Babesia is a parasite. I've been fighting the parasites since 2015, but they come back. I have severe interstitial cystitis, positional vertigo, and so forgetful. I feel I have Lyme also, but my doctor says it is just chronic inflammatory response syndrome. What do you think? Thank you, and congrats on your book. All right. So a number of things. So first of all, I have published a book finally, and I'll show you that page later tonight. You can find it on Amazon. It's in a paperback form, and it's in a Kindle version. Through my website, you can also buy it as a PDF download that you get right away. Okay, and it's called Anti-Germ Action Plans. And basically, it's a book that tells you how to treat every kind of infection you might see in Lyme disease, like Babesia, like Bartonella, like Lyme, like parasites, intestinal parasites to virus infections, yeast, any kind of germ you might get in Lyme. My book is about what do you use to get rid of it. And as you know, when I present here, I give you practical steps to take. My book gives you practical steps to take. So I'll show you that later. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. All right. So in terms of, so when I look at a situation like this, and I have somebody that has these kind of symptoms that you're describing, like the vertigo, interstitial cystitis, forgetful, I think you said fatigue in there too. I question if there could be Lyme. Now, the fact that you've got a positive FISH test suggests that you have been bitten by a tick somewhere. Now, other vectors might spread Babesia too, but it suggests that you've been bitten by a tick. And if that tick bit you, it could have transmitted other infections, all right? So now if I look at your Western blot result, even though IGeneX reports that IgM Western blot as an indeterminate, it could be interpreted as a positive test if there are enough other symptoms that suggest Lyme, and especially if you have another infection that might be transmitted by a tick. The fact that you've got one type of infection that could be transmitted by ticks suggests you might have picked up another one that often goes with it, which is Lyme too, okay? So that Western blot, everyone, when we look at the Western blot, which is what you gave me the results of here, the IgM means is we're looking to see, does your immune system make antibodies that attach to proteins found on the covering of the germ, all right? And when IGeneX does the Western blot, we're looking to see if you have antibodies against 12 proteins, and we identify those proteins by what they weigh. So there is a protein that weighs 31 kilodaltons, and there's another protein that weighs 41 kilodaltons, okay? Now, although IGeneX tests you for 12 different proteins, if you have antibodies against them, there's actually 6 that tend to be more specific for Lyme. And what I mean by those words, more specific for Lyme, we want to make sure that when antibodies attach to these Lyme proteins, that they really are antibodies made by your immune system that are attacking Lyme, not another infection, okay? So the problem is that some of these Lyme proteins actually can attract antibodies that are made against other infections like viruses, okay? Now, the 6 proteins where it's rarer that can happen are protein 2325, 31, 34, 41, and 8393. Those 6 proteins are pretty specific for Lyme. The trouble is 31 can sometimes have virus antibodies that rarely attach to it from a virus called human herpes virus type 6, okay? And 41 sometimes can have antibodies that attach to it that happen to be made against bacteria that have tails. So bacteria that have tails sometimes will have a protein 41 as well too, all right? So when you get this pattern of a 31-41, where 31 rarely might have antibodies really that are supposed to be attaching to a virus that happen to attach to these Lyme proteins, and 41 that rarely sometimes will have antibodies that attach to a tail of another bacteria that happen to attach to these Lyme proteins, there's a possibility it could be a false positive, if you were to call that a positive pattern, okay? What I do with a pattern like that, though, is I look at all the symptoms. And if there's enough symptoms there that say Lyme, I'm going to interpret that 31-41 as a positive test, okay? Now, lately, more recently, IGeneX has developed a refined Western blot. I could call it a refined Western blot. It's their new test that they're calling an Immunoblot, okay? And what they do in their Immunoblot is they have they're genetically inside of cells growing Lyme proteins in the laboratory, all right? So the Western blot, the way they get their proteins in a Western blot is they grow Lyme germs, whole Lyme germs. They kill them and they take their proteins, okay, all right? The way that they do the Immunoblot is they have genetically engineered cells to produce cleaned up versions of these Lyme proteins. And what they do in the cleaned up versions of the Lyme proteins is they have removed any protein parts that might attach that to which virus antibodies and other germ antibodies might attach to. Okay, so what's left is just the sequences, the protein sequences that only Lyme antibodies would attach to. So in other words, on an Immunoblot, the chances of getting a false positive because antibodies made against another infection attached to 31 or attached to a 41 is pretty small, okay? All right. So sometimes what I'll do these days is I'll do more the Immunoblot because you have less chance of a false positive, basically, when you look at a 31-41 pattern. The other reason I prefer the Immunoblot over the Western blot now is that they're using 8 strains of Lyme. So it has a better chance of picking up multiple strains versus the Western blot version only uses 2. Okay. Now, when we look at studies that IGeneX has done in-house to determine how accurate, how good, how useful is the Western blot at picking up Lyme versus how useful is the Immunoblot, the Western blot will find it around 80% of the time. The new Immunoblot will find it around 91% of the time. All right. So one thing you might consider doing in terms of trying to get your doctor to look at this a little more differently, and I apologize partly for this because it's an expensive test, but is to ask to have the Immunoblot done. Again, it has about an 11% better chance of finding if you have Lyme than the Western blot. Okay, all right. Now, The other thing that I would point out to you here is I know your doctor thinks you may have chronic inflammatory response syndrome. That's the CIRS that she writes there, everyone. So that is a term that was coined by Dr. Richie Shoemaker. Dr. Shoemaker is a family doctor actually or a primary care doctor out in Pocomoke, Maryland on the Chesapeake Bay that developed a whole theory that shows that that there's about 25% of people that develop chronic inflammation in their body because they cannot remove mold toxins once they breathe them in and they get inside of them. 75% of us, our immune systems remove them, but in 25% of people, that doesn't happen, okay? And as part of his theory in trying to treat people and get them better from having too many mold toxins in them, what he found is sometimes when he would remove all those mold toxins, they would still stay inflamed. They would still stay sick. And so he developed a whole bunch of ideas about why that is. Why would they stay perpetually inflamed? And that's called chronic inflammatory response syndrome. The trouble is with his whole theory about people staying inflamed after their mold toxins are removed is that often the reason they're still inflamed is it's Lyme disease inflaming them. And Dr. Shoemaker just doesn't believe in chronic Lyme disease, all right? So the problem is a lot of people have trained with him and they're knowledgeable about SIRS, but they are trained in his thinking, which is chronic Lyme doesn't trigger all this ongoing inflammation. So that's a lot of stuff I just said. I question if you may have Lyme just like you do, based on what you've just told me here, okay? Because you've got at least one infection like Babesia that can be tick-borne, that can be transmitted. Could be transmitted by other things too, which increases the chances you might have picked up another tick-borne infection in Lyme. That 3141, although they're calling it a determinant, I would interpret it if you have enough symptoms as actually being positive, okay? So you might want to go the next step further, which is to get the Immunoblot that has a better chance of finding Lyme if you have it, okay? All right, I think that gives you enough information to go with there, okay? All right, good luck to you. Oh, the Immunoblot runs, I think, $495 versus, that's why I said it's more expensive. The Western blot is $250 if you just do the IgM and IgG Western blot. Okay. All right. Oh, those letters IgM and IgG, everyone, those stand for two families of antibodies that we develop when we get infected. IgMs are what we tend to develop when we first get sick. IgGs are what develop later. Most infections, IgMs are supposed to go away after about 3 to 6 months. In Lyme, they don't. About 80% of the time, they don't. That causes a lot of confusion among doctors as well, too. All right. Good luck to you, Janet. Thank you for that question. Hello, Rita. Let's say hello, Dr. Ross. I'm wondering if you have worked with many chronic Lyme patients who have had heart complications due to this disease. I currently have tricuspid mild leakage and increased pulmonary pressure, but the cardiologist does not feel it is Lyme related. Have you seen this? What are your thoughts? Thanks for all you do. So I tend to see you're welcome, by the way. So I tend to see Lyme, with the kind of problems that Lyme tends to cause are more electrical conduction problems of the heart. It can interfere with the electrical pattern, so you get heart rhythm problems mostly. You might get inflammation of the muscles of the heart called a carditis sometimes from Lyme, but I am not aware of Lyme causing tricuspid valve leakage or regurgitation. I'm just not aware of that happening. I don't think there's enough research database that would show that, nor in the last, since 2004, since I've been managing Lyme disease, have I seen anyone with that kind of a complication. So I would tend to lean in the direction and be of the opinion of what your heart doctor is saying as well too. Okay. Now that's not to say Lyme didn't cause it. What I was saying is I think that Lyme would have caused it. Okay. All right. Keep in mind, that, and I think everyone knows this, is that other common medical problems or medical problems that might occur in people without Lyme also can occur in people with Lyme. And it's not always Lyme that causes those problems, okay? We got to be careful not to put our Lyme blinders on and see that everything is caused by Lyme, or when we have Lyme disease, that everything that happens to us is Lyme, all right? There's sometimes just common things that happen with other people happen to people with Lyme as well too. All right. Good luck to you, Rita. Hello, Anna. See, good evening, Dr. Ross. Hope you are well. I am. Thank you. See, what do you think of the DNA Connections urine PCR test for Lyme and co-infections? Is it worth the $500? I don't trust the test. I'll just be quite honest with you. So in my practice, so what DNA Connections has done, they're a lab out in Colorado that has come up with a urine test to see if you have the DNA of Lyme and the various co-infection germs like Bartonella and Babesia. And they've done a great job of marketing this test to the naturopathic doctor community and some of the integrative medicine doctor community too. They've done a great job of marketing. Okay. Right now, whenever anyone comes up with a new way of testing for something, or they are the first time doing it out of their lab, one of the standard things that labs will do is they will do a type of testing to validate that their test is actually accurate. All right. Validation testing is what's that called. All right. Hold on here just a minute. Excuse me. So when we do validation testing, what we do is we find samples of either people or blood that we know which ones actually have the illness. And then we see with our new tests, like the DNA Connections Lyme test or their Babesia test, we see how accurate is this test at picking up the right people that have it and not picking up people that don't have it and saying it's positive, okay? So the problem I have with DNA Connections is they never did that testing. I actually have talked to people in the lab. They have never gone out and done that kind of testing. So for instance, IGeneX, as you just heard me talk about, they've done internal validation studies on their Western blot and their Immunoblot and even their other tests, where they can say that, yep, our test has the ability to find in known cases, it works effectively this percent of the time. DNA Connections has never done that, all right? And where I started getting suspicious about their test is that because they've done such a great job marketing to the naturopathic doctor community out here, I tend in my practice, I have tended to act more as a referral for patients that aren't getting better with other doctors. They often will come to see me, for instance, okay? And so to get another opinion. And so I was getting a lot of people that were coming in with these DNA connection tests ordered by a number of the naturopaths, and patients being told they had Babesia or they have Bartonella. But when I start talking with them and I break out the symptoms that look like a Bartonella or the symptoms that could often be there if you have Babesia, they have none of them. All right. Very often they have none of them. And a number of those patients transfer care to me, and I never addressed their supposed positive DNA connections, Bartonella or Babesia. I never treated for those infections, and they got well without doing anything about it. All right. So I don't know if it's an accurate test, and therefore I don't use it. Okay. To this day, in terms of Lyme testing, I still think a Western blot, either done through Stony Brook, State University of New York, Stony Brook, or done through IGeneX, or the new Immunoblot through IGeneX, or a type of test called a ELISpot test done through Armin Labs, are the most accurate ways of looking to see if you have Lyme. When it comes to Bartonella and Babesia, we do not have accurate testing. Now, there are some labs that specialize in it. For instance, like Galaxy Labs out in North Carolina specializes in testing for Bartonella. The problem is that the test that we have through any lab does not test for all strains of Bartonella. So we estimate 30 strains of Bartonella. And testing through most labs is going to pick up maybe 2 strains at best, okay? IGeneX only picks up 1, for instance. Babesia, we estimate 15 to 20 strains, and we can only test for 2 or 3 strains of Babesia too, all right? So what I like to do for the Babesia and Bartonella is actually look at what does the clinical picture tell me. Are there enough symptoms of Bartonella and Babesia? And then I test, I will treat based on what those symptoms are, all right? I'll show you an article you can read here in a minute where you can look at what those symptoms are. That's how I go about diagnosing Bartonella Babesia, and that's how I suggest people do it too. All right, now when it comes to the infections called Anaplasma or Ehrlichia, which are other tick-borne infections you can get too. The standard, they're pretty easy to treat if you just get on doxycycline for at least 2 weeks, okay? So because most people, when they start getting treated for Lyme, will at some time be on tetracyclines as a means of treating the Lyme infection, that will automatically take care of Anaplasma and Ehrlichia, and therefore I don't test for those either, okay? They're pretty easy to get rid of, all right? All right, let me show you an article. I'm going to show you an article so that you can see a number of resources you can look at more about testing and some of the issues I'm raising here later, okay? So I'm going to do a screen share here. All right. All right, so this is at Treat Lyme, and so I'll just show you what I was talking about earlier. So I now have a new book. And you can find that. You can either click up here on my books tab, or you can click down here in this section. And the book is called Anti-Germ Action Plans for Lyme Disease. Take a look at it. Keep in mind when you're purchasing, you're supporting my ability to keep doing these webinars as well too. But this is based upon a lot of the writings that are even here at Treat Lyme and a lot of the teachings I give you here in the webinars. Okay, all right. So I'd appreciate if you would purchase this book if you find it interesting as something that might help you. All right. So again, in here I have treatment plans for Bartonella, Babesia, Ehrlichia, Candida, which is yeast, parasites, viruses, etc. Very practical approaches you can use, either herbal or prescription options. I lay it all out for you. I also have included my treatment program for Herxheimer reactions in here, and the whole Ross Lyme support protocol. My approach to treating Lyme is in here as well too. Okay, all aspects of Lyme is in there as well. All right. So let me go back here. All right, now in terms of my online guide though, which has a lot of information in it, in terms of what's the best way to how to diagnose. I talk about how do you diagnose. Okay, so in terms of Bartonella and Babesia, again, I go by the symptoms and signs. Okay, all right, and then you can look at my video article I have about how do you diagnose Lyme disease too. In terms of testing, you want to see some more information about that. I have one big article where I review all the various ways that you can test for Lyme disease, and that's called A Review of Lyme Infection Tests, Pass or Fail. Okay, you can look at that one here as well too. All right, let me go back here. All right, so Anna, I know that's a long response. I think I'm having a lot of long responses tonight, but I don't trust DNA connections. I urge people actually to stay away from it. All right, so this is a question from Tan. The difficulty I'm going to have in posting your question, Tan, is it's very long. And when I have posted long questions before, unfortunately, it has blocked my screen, so I can't continue the webinar. All right, I can't click on buttons I'm supposed to on my side. So I'm not going to post it, but I will read it. All right. Okay, so hi, Dr. Ross. Your website webinars have been a total godsend. Thank you so much. You're welcome. I think they're great resources to help you. I just want to help people recover from this. So I appreciate you saying that. See, my question is, which blood test from which company would you recommend for these symptoms? And these symptoms are migrating electrical shocks and knife-like pain, feeling of brain swelling and profound dizziness and head fever, memory loss, unable to speak or comprehend basic speech, hypermobile joints with no history of joint issues, started with an extreme cracking after taking an immunosuppressant drug, rapid muscle wasting, including upper neck, behind head, bladder irritability, a change in my period, burning pain in the uterus, skin tearing, sudden gum recession, candida on the tongue, easy bruising, slow healing, every symptom imaginable from MCAS and POTS and fibromyalgia. MCAS, everyone, is mast cell activation syndrome. POTS is postural orthostatic tachycardic syndrome. And fibromyalgia, I think everyone knows what that is. Eye issues from dryness, inflammation, light sound sensitivity, racing thoughts, stiff neck, violent dry retching, weight loss, migraines, chronic fatigue, nerve compression, gastroparesis, chills, fever, hair loss, and extreme shortness of breath. that improved with antibiotics. Had 5 ticks as a child in Australia, but got sick after a trip through Asia. Okay, so first of all, I would test for Lyme, the Lyme germ, the Lyme infection, and either I would do the Immunoblot through IGeneX, which you can get those, you can order those kits into Australia, okay? Or I would look at doing the ELISpot test for Lyme from Armin Labs. So briefly, everyone, what an ELISpot test is we take a type of white blood cell out of your blood called a T cell. All right, T cells are what fight Lyme, and we see if they have memory of attacking Lyme in you. All right, the way we see if they have memory of that is we in a test tube we actually have them. We expose them to Lyme proteins. And if they have seen Lyme in you before, if they've tried to get rid of Lyme in you before, they release a bunch of cytokines that we can measure. And so if they have these cytokines that we're able to measure, then it says that Lyme has been in you. The ELISpot is accurate at finding if you might have Lyme about 85% of the time. Okay, all right. The other symptoms you're having, a lot of neurologic symptoms that you have, for instance, the electrical shocks, the knife symptoms. I think you said you have bladder irritability, the muscle wasting, which is often will be part of neurologic as well too, racing thoughts, the light sound sensitivity. A lot of those neurologic type symptoms you're having are things that I see in Bartonella. All right, so I would think about Bartonella in you, and as I just said earlier, I don't believe in testing for Bartonella. I think you should treat based on what the symptoms are. I would definitely treat for Bartonella if your Lyme testing comes back positive. Okay, now Lyme can give you some of this neurologic irritability as well too. All right, the air hunger you're having also can be part of Lyme. All right, so again, I probably would not do the co-infection testing. I make my decisions to treat co-infections based on what your symptoms show, because testing will miss most Bartonella, testing will miss most Babesia, but at least get a high quality Lyme test, because if that comes back positive, that increases your chances of having Babesia or Bartonella, especially given the amount of tick bites that you've had in the past too. All right. The Armin labs you can also have sent into Australia to get those tests done as well too. All right. So that's Armin, ARMIN labs. They're out of Germany basically, but they do send you kits that you can send back into them wherever you are in the world. All right. Good luck to you, Tan. Hello, Kelly. Let's see. Is Armin Labs in Germany considered legitimate in their approach to testing Lyme and other co-infections? Thanks for your guidance. Yeah, as I've been saying tonight, I think they are very good when it comes to doing their ELISpot for Lyme. I don't think you necessarily need to do their Immunospot that they do, which is the equivalent of a West. They call their Immunospot is actually a Western blot, just like IGeneX says a Western blot. Okay, I would probably just do the ELISpot testing. I think it is accurate. I don't, again, think you necessarily need to do their Bartonella and all their other germ testing, because I think you should treat and figure those out based on what the symptoms tell you. Okay. All right. You can do it, though. I think they have valid testing. It's just if it comes back negative for Bartonella Babesia and you still have screaming symptoms of Bartonella Babesia, test them. Or treat them, because the testing misses most strains of that. Even out of Armin Labs, they do. Okay? All right. Thanks for that question. Hello, Sandra. Sandra just said hello, Dr. Ross. Hello, Michele. Say hi, Dr. Ross. Do you think taking Protandim is very helpful for Lyme and mold? Is it safe to take with medications? If I can't afford liposomal glutathione, would reduced glutathione be okay? I also have severe head pressure and brain feels like swollen inside. What can I take for that? Okay. So first of all, regarding the glutathione, my preference still is liposomal, but that's because it gets better absorption. So glutathione, everyone, is a very potent, strong antioxidant that is made inside of every one of our cells. It's made to repair damage. All right. But it's also made in the liver in high quantities, and it helps with detox. And it also can help repair nerve injury as well, too. It's a strong antioxidant, and And as an antioxidant, it can help decrease inflammation triggered by inflammation chemicals called cytokines. When somebody has Lyme disease, their immune system makes too many inflammation chemicals called cytokines, and that's what gives you most of the Lyme symptoms. Glutathione can help with that, okay? So I like using glutathione because it can help with detox, it can help repair damage, any kind of damage that is, and because it helps lower cytokines as well too. The problem is with glutathione is a lot of it can get destroyed by the acid in the stomach and be poorly absorbed. So liposomal, which is glutathione that is microscopically wrapped in fat, tends to have better absorption. There's good studies, for instance, Research Nutritionals, who makes a liposomal product called Trifortify Orange, Trifortify Watermelon. They've got good red blood cell studies that show that they get increased amounts of glutathione in those cells when they take it in this oral way. Now, another way to get glutathione in is reduce glutathione. Yes, it could work. It's just not as effective. My experience says it doesn't build up as good of levels as what the liposomal glutathione can. Okay. Now, Protandim, I am drawing a blank on that one. Hold on here just a minute. I'm going to do a quick look up here just a minute. So it's got, if we're talking the same, all right, so I'm just looking at what Protandim has in it here. Bear with me for a minute. I'm actually looking online. All right, so it's got withania, which is ashwagandha. It's got milk thistle in it, bacopa, and curcumin. All right, so the curcumin that is in that can help decrease inflammation. The ashwagandha can help your immune system work better. It's also something known as an adaptogen. It can help give you energy to help you deal with stress. I actually kind of like that. I don't use it in my practice. It may help give you more energy. It may help your immune system work better in dealing with Lyme and mold. And the curcumin that is in there may help lower inflammation as well too. All right. I don't have experience using it enough to know if it does make a difference. I tend not to like using compounds that have multiple things in it. So, for instance, in my Ross Lyme support protocol, to help deal with stress, I recommend people take ashwagandha just by itself. A 400 milligram pill, 2 pills in the morning and 2 pills between 1 and 2. And to lower cytokines, I recommend that people take liposomal curcumin. Remember, I talked about liposomal earlier. It helps microscopically wrap your medicine or your herb in fat to get better absorption. Same thing with curcumin. It's better absorbed if you wrap it in fat, microscopically wrap it in fat, that is. And so I like using liposomal curcumin to decrease inflammation created by the Lyme infection as well, too. All right. So it could be helpful. It's got some of the components in it that I use as individual items in my Ross Lyme support protocol. All right. Let's see. In terms of your head pressure and your brain feeling swollen, consider treating for your Lyme infection, meaning germ killers for Lyme. Consider possibly treating for Bartonella, although I would need to ask you a lot more questions to see if you actually truly have Bartonella. Okay. And then in terms of dealing with that head pressure, I would look at being on decreasing inflammation. And the ways that I would do it probably would be to use glutathione. Either my preference is liposomal, but if you can't, then do the reduced 500 milligrams once or twice a day. In terms of the curcumin, you might even try going up to 1,000 milligrams 3 times a day. And again, I would prefer using a liposomal curcumin. Okay. All right. So I'm going to do a quick screen share. I'm going to show you a couple of things here. I'm going to do a screen share. Here we are. All right. So again, if you click on this treatment protocol tab here, You'll find the Ross Lyme Support Protocol. You also will find a copy of the Ross Lyme Support Protocol in my book, Anti-Germ Action Plans. I actually have it in there as well too. Okay. But anyhow, it lays out the key steps that you want to do throughout a Lyme treatment. One of those is do things to get 7 to 9 hours of sleep. Getting sleep helps restore your immune system. Okay. Number 2, I prefer that people are on a paleo diet. It tends to decrease your chances of getting too many yeast, and it helps your energy factories in your cells called mitochondria work better. Okay. Number 3, lower inflammation, lower cytokine inflammation by being on curcumin. Okay. Number 4, be on an adaptogen. That's the ashwagandha I was just telling you about. Adaptogens help the body deal with stress to help the immune system work better too. Okay. Anyhow, there's more steps in my Ross Lyme Support Protocol. These are the key steps you should do throughout a treatment. Okay. All right. Okay. And again, you can find a copy of the Ross Lyme Support Protocol is included in the appendix area of my new book called Anti-Germ Action Plan. So if you want to have a printed version of it, it's included in my book. Okay. All right. Now let me do one other thing here. All right. So I often get asked, where do I get high quality supplements? All right. And it's really interesting in developing my book. One of the things I had to look at is the information about supplement quality. And so there's been some studies done using DNA technology where people have gone in and pulled supplements off the shelf. And what they have found is using DNA technology that a lot of companies just don't put in their supplements what they're supposed to, right? So in a study that was done by the New York Attorney General, they found that supplements at Walmart, Walgreens, Target, there was another company too, that when they did this DNA technology of looking to see if what they said was on the label was in the product, the correct items were only in a product 21% of the time. Okay. All right. In addition, what they found in using that DNA technology is that 31% of the time there were additional products that were in these supplements that were not on the product label. All right. So you got to be careful when you use supplements. And so what I've tried to do here at my supplement store is to use supplements that are primarily ones that are sold to doctors, and they're considered to be higher quality. And I've actually investigated the companies, tried to do due diligence to find out that they actually are putting in these products what they're supposed to put in. So if you're wondering what are the brands that a person might use, you can take a look at the various brands that I have here. The other thing is anyone can purchase from my store, okay, if you're looking for a site to do that. But if you're just wondering what are good brands, take a look here, okay? All right, let me go back. All right, thank you for that question, Michele. Good luck to you. Michele, there's one other thing that you might want to try doing. If you cannot afford the liposomal glutathione, sometimes you can take what are known as the building blocks for glutathione, the things that cells use to produce glutathione. And there are two. One would be N-acetylcysteine, or NAC is what that's known as. And you would do 500 milligrams 3 times a day. And you might combine that with something called alpha lipoic acid, or ALA. And you might take that at about 300 milligrams twice a day, or 200 milligrams 3 times a day. Those are the chemical building blocks that help your cells produce more glutathione, and sometimes they're more affordable than what the liposomal glutathione is too. Okay? All right. Good luck to you again. All right. All right. This next question is I think it's a long one. Yeah, this one's going to be a little bit long for me to post, so I'm going to just read it. This is from Kristen. Hi, Dr. Ross. I have 2 questions. The first is regarding muscle soreness. I have been able to work out consistently for years and get a solid sweat 3 to 4 times per week, which I now follow with an Epsom salt bath. As of April, I have been on the following protocol for Lyme, plus co-infections. Let's see, mold and mercury and yeast. She's been on transfer factor multi-immune, Lyme plus, transfer factor multi-immune and transfer factor Lyme plus, biocidin, trifortify, which is glutathione, everyone, NT-factor energy, phytostan, prescripticus pro, liposomal vitamin C, the energy infusion, and I recently added topical magnesium citrate and oil lotion. 3 weeks ago, I also added an activated charcoal, which I take at night. I have had a recent change for days following a workout. My muscles are more sore than they have ever been. I drink a lot of water all day, but I am also really struggling with inflammation. Am I missing something? What do you think could help? All right. Let me just look back through your list here for a minute. So it looks like April is when you started treating things. Okay. So I guess I would need to ask you all that questions. So when people start getting more sore, I start wondering about more germ killing. All right, that's one thing, right? But you're not the only things that might be causing more germ killing is the transfer factors because they may be turning on your immune system to attack the germ better. All right, and it seems you've been on those for a while, so I don't see that. The other thing I always go through my mind is I try to see could it be have you added or increased an antimicrobial like a cat's claw or amoxicillin, one of the things we use to kill germs, because that could trigger a Herxheimer reaction, which a Herxheimer reaction is the immune system sees dead bug parts and makes more inflammation chemicals that make you feel worse. Okay, so but I don't see that you've done that here either. The only thing I would consider is if that muscle soreness began when you added in the activated charcoal, it might be that you're having some kind of a side effect to it. And so one of my rules of thumb is when things start going haywire, look at the last thing you added. All right. And it can be, even though activated charcoal seems like a pretty simple thing, shouldn't bother you, it could very well be that you're having a reaction to it. And so there's another Marty Ross rule of medicine, which is anything can happen to anyone with anything. All right. So what you might do if this all started after you added the activated charcoal, or you added even the magnesium oil, at least that's how I think this goes, pull those out, see if that muscle pain gets better. Okay. So that's what I would do. That's what you could be missing, at least from what I can tell from your story. All right. Unfortunately, in these webinars, I don't get to do a lot of questions to find out a little bit more information. But from what you've written there, that's what I wonder. Let's see here. Lastly, it is a significant challenge to spread out the supplements throughout the day, given some need to be with food, some far away from it. If my stomach can handle it, can I take the daily doses all at once, i.e. 3 tablets of charcoal all at once, or tablets of Cytoquel at the same time? Did you know that it is not supposed to be taken with vitamin E? This would make life easier. Thanks. All right. So Cytoquel, unfortunately, is going to work best if you take it 3 times a day. Activated charcoal, because is going to probably work best if you take them 3 times a day. So the answer is probably not. But boy, you are on a lot of stuff though as I look here, and I'm not sure you necessarily need to be on all of those things. But I can understand how it could be creating some difficulty. But I can't say what to take away. I need to know more about what your symptoms are. You obviously have good reason for taking those. You've designed that with your symptoms in mind. All right. All right. Oh, I'm sorry. You aren't a germ killer. You're on the biocide, and I missed that. Yeah. So if you haven't recently increased the biocide and these symptoms started after you more recently added charcoal or magnesium, pull those out. See if those symptoms get better. Okay. All right. Good luck to you, Kristen. All right. Let's see here. Hello, Sherry. Let's see, dear Dr. Ross. I've had stomach inflammation apparently caused by antibiotics for over a month. I quit my treatment plan 5 weeks ago, but I still have trouble digesting and eliminating food despite a mushy diet. At present, I'm off everything except licorice, slippery elm, and I can never say this last one. You're on a proton pump inhibitor, okay? Should I be, which is a prescription, should I be on at least an herbal protocol as it appears that my GI tract will take many months to heal? I've been diagnosed with Lyme, Babesia, Bartonella, with vertigo as my primary symptom. Which antibiotics and supplements would you suggest? Many thanks for your kind support and guidance. All right. I'm trying to think here. So if you're having so unfortunately, if you were to use even the herbal antibiotics, all of those have a tendency to be acidic, which might irritate the lining of your stomach, okay? If you were to use a biocidin, for instance, that could be very acidic, even if it's in pill form or if it's in liquid drops or if it's in the liposomal form. The Otoba, cat's claw I like using, same thing. The Acida acuta Hutania, because they tend to come in tinctures, same thing. Unfortunately, I think you're going to be stuck probably for at least a few more weeks. The one thing you probably ought to consider adding to help soothe your gut would be some aloe vera. Excuse me just a minute. Would be aloe vera gel. Sometimes you can get it at health food stores, or aloe vera juice. And you would want to drink 1 or 2 ounces 3 times a day. That can help coat your stomach to allow it to heal better, okay? The other thing I like to coat the stomach with is the licorice. I like that you're doing that. But what I think you could add to this would be the aloe vera, okay? All right. Sorry about that, Sherry. Good luck to you. All right, let's see here. Hello, Yvonne. Good evening, Dr. Ross. Thank you so much for these classes and all the information you have posted on your website. You're welcome. I have some questions about Otoba bark cat's claw protocol. Generally, how long does the protocol need to continue? 2, how long does it stay active in your system after ingesting it, and what is the half-life? 3, is twice a day the ideal frequency? 4, how do you know when you are done, or is it time to try to add something else? All right, let's see. And let's see, B, neurological. Can you talk about how to distinguish Neuro Lyme from toxicity impacting the brain based on symptoms and functions? How do you treat Neuro Lyme and neurotoxins? How do you treat MTHFR? Can you talk about the interaction between this and Lyme? Well, you got a lot of questions here. So I'm just noticing. Let me try to break some of it. I may not be able to get to all of them, but let's try to break it down one at a time. All right. So in terms of the Otoba and the cat's claw, I use it as long as a person's improving. And for some people, I might use it 6 months. Some people, I might use it a year. I've used it even 1.5 years in people before. Okay. If you do get all the way well on it, I usually have people, I'll consider stopping it when somebody is completely well for at least 2 months, or at a really good plateau for at least 4 months before I consider stopping it, okay? I am not aware of any studies that have been done about the half-life. And half-life, everyone, means how long does it take to eliminate half of the medicine out of you. Generally, we recognize that the medicine is completely out of you after 4 half-lives, okay? But I have not seen that anyone has done studies about the half-life of Otoba or cat's claw. Unfortunately, that's the way it is with a lot of herbs. We just don't have that information. So I can't tell you that. I find in terms of ideal frequency, twice a day works very well. There are sometimes I will actually have a person take it 3 times a day if I don't think 2 times a day has been working well enough for them. All right, let's see. You know, I find I don't know that anyone's done studies to say how long it remains active, because that would be also related to the half-life. We just don't know. Again, the best I can say is clinically, I find best improvements either at 2 times a day or 3 times a day. Okay. All right. Let's see. So be neurological. I can talk, let's see. One, can you talk about the distinguish between Neuro Lyme from toxicity impacting the brain based on symptoms and function? How do you treat Neuro Lyme and neurotoxins? How do you treat MTHFR? And can you talk about interaction between this and Lyme? Okay. So, so Neuro Lyme in the brain basically means inflammation in the brain, okay, triggered by infections. And often if we're talking Neuro Lyme, that's either going to be Lyme or Bartonella. So if you're treating on your own, make sure that you look at my symptom list about. It's an article called "It Could Be Bartonella Babesia," where I describe the overall symptoms that somebody might have that can suggest Bartonella. If you have enough of those, you should actually be treating for the infection. Okay. So the front line of treating any Neuro Lyme is treating the infections. All right. So that's number one. And with Lyme, yes, definitely keep treating your Lyme too. Okay. Second thing I like to do when people have significant Neuro Lyme symptoms, cognitive and thinking problems, maybe lots of numbness, for instance, difficulty using your muscles, I like to put them on glutathione. And the reason I like using glutathione is for a couple reasons. And I talked about glutathione earlier tonight. But glutathione is the master reparative antioxidant that is made in every one of our cells. So it can repair damage. Okay. Secondly, it's the master detox chemical, all right? Because there really is no way to tell, are the symptoms infection, inflammation caused or toxin inflammation caused. And so one way that you can wind up doing is you just cover for it. And so you can use glutathione. I usually will do the Trifortify product, that liposomal glutathione, and I'll have people take 5 milliliters once or twice a day when somebody's got bad Neuro Lyme. Number 3, when somebody's got bad Neuro Lyme, I like them to be on curcumin, right? And the reason I like them to be on curcumin is a couple reasons. Number 1, it decreases cytokines. And again, cytokines are inflammation chemicals made by white blood cells when they're trying to get rid of infections. In Lyme, white blood cells often don't do a good job, so they try harder and harder, and eventually they make too many cytokines. Too many cytokines make it so you can't think, right? Meaning too many cytokines give you Neuro Lyme. Okay, that kind of inflammation gives you Neuro Lyme, all right? And too many cytokines suppress the immune system, give you fatigue, etc. Too many cytokines are really what Lyme symptoms are caused by, okay? So you want to lower them. The other thing that happens is there's some of the white blood cells in the brain produce a chemical called quinolinic acid that is actually a toxin to the brain too. And curcumin decreases or can decrease quinolinic acid, all right? So as part of my Neuro Lyme protocol, to protect against the quinolinic acid toxins that might be there, but also to decrease the inflammation that's part of Neuro Lyme, regardless of whether it's toxins causing it or whether it is Lyme infection or Bartonella infection causing it, curcumin, 500 milligrams, 3 times a day, liposomal glutathione to decrease toxins and to repair damage. That is Trifortify. I like doing 400 to 500 milligrams, which is 5 milliliters 1 time a day of that. And again, treat the infections, okay? Now, in terms of MTHFR, that is a detoxification defect that some people have, also known as a methylation defect. So what happens, and this has been something that was MTHFR, treating for MTHFR was a big rage a few years ago. To be honest with you, I don't find much benefit from going for it unless you happen to have a double mutation. All right, so let me tell you what I mean by that. All right, so again, the master detox chemical made in every cell and also made in the liver is glutathione, okay? It's a downstream product, all right? Many steps upstream is where we have to convert diet folate into something called activated folate, all right? And if you don't get diet folate being converted into activated folate, which is known as methylated folate, then all the way down here, you don't get enough glutathione produced, okay? So generally, even with MTHFR, if somebody's got the genetic defect that makes it so that, oh, well, actually, let me step back one step further. All right, so what does MTHFR stand for? It stands for methytetrahydrofolate reductase. Anything in medicine that ends in ACE, ASE is an enzyme, okay? So it's that there's an enzyme that is supposed to help convert diet folate to activated folate, methylated folate. All right. And if that enzyme is genetically programmed incorrectly, it's made incorrectly because the genetic program is incorrect, then you're not going to have adequate conversion of diet folate to activated folate. Okay. All right. So when we do MTHFR testing, there's two genes we pay attention to. One is the C677T gene. The other one is the A1298C gene. All right. And where I find people have the most problems and get benefit treating for MTHFR is if you have a double mutation of both the C677T and the A1298C. All right. So when I say double mutation of both of those, each of those genes, there's a mom component and a dad component. All right. So if you have a defect in the mom, the dad, and then the mom and the dad of A1298C and C677T, then those are the people that have a complete blockade. I have found it helpful to treat them. And usually what I like to treat them with is to give them the methylated folate and to give them methylated vitamin B12. All right. But if I don't find that double mutation, I generally just find working with glutathione by itself is sufficient. Okay. All right. Let's see. Number D is the essential oils. Do you have any opinion on using cinnamon, black clove, and oregano to treat Lyme and Neuro Lyme? So I don't have opinion about cinnamon, or the clove. Oregano, I do have some experience working with as part of another compound that I like using called biocidin. It is one of the active ingredients within biocidin that can support Lyme treatment and germ killing, basically. Okay, I think it does. I think oregano can be useful, but I can't make any comments about the other oils that you mentioned here. Okay, yeah, I think that's it. I think I covered most of your questions. All right, so if you want to read more about how do you treat MTHFR, there's a whole article I have in the detoxification chapter. Let me just show you that real quick. All right, so back in the Treat Lyme, my online Lyme guide, take a look at the chapter on detoxification. And in here, I talk about the MTHFR and detoxification, okay? Where I lay out how I would approach that, okay? All right. All right. All right, Devon. Good luck to you. Thank you for that question. Hello, Susan. Hi, Dr. Ross. Thank you for your dedication to helping Lyme patients. You're welcome. Have you heard of Japanese knotweed? I think you mean Japanese knotweed, actually. I haven't heard of Japanese knotweed, but Japanese knotweed I have. Japanese knotweed is something that's recommended as part of the protocol, Herbal protocol. It has some anti-cytokine effects. Buhner also believes it has some germ killing potential as well too. I tend not to use it in my treatment. I haven't found it to be as useful as other germ killing recommendations I make, and I tend to like lowering cytokines by using the curcumin and sometimes adding in the glutathione. Okay, all right. So anyhow, those are my thoughts on that. Okay, I'm going to do a quick screen share. If you're wondering how do I lower cytokines, because remember tonight I said basically most of your Lyme symptoms are cytokine symptoms. All right. So one of the basic steps I have people take is to do curcumin. The next thing, if that's not enough, I'll have them add in glutathione. All right. If you're looking for more information about these things called cytokines, because really cytokines are at the core of why you have Lyme symptoms, take a look at my online Lyme guide and take a look at the chapter I have called Herxheimer and Cytokines. All right. And there's a whole article I've written about cytokines and the various steps you can take to lower them, including curcumin, including glutathione. There's some other things I mentioned in here as well, too. Okay? All right. All right. Let's see here. Thank you for that question, Susan. Good luck to you. Hello, Katerina. Let's see. Good evening, Dr. Ross. I have gained an enormous amount of weight, 40 pounds in total, since contracting Lyme and co-infections, Babesia, Bartonella, Ehrlichia, Mycoplasma. Any advice for weight loss with Lyme? Thanks, Kat. All right. So, one of the things that there's two things to consider. All right. Well, three actually. One is, unfortunately, when a person has Lyme, you are not as active, right? So there's not going to be as great of amount of calorie burning, and therefore there might be some accumulation that can happen from that, right? So that's one potential cause. The second thing that can happen is these cytokines that I mentioned earlier tonight can interfere with correct functioning of your hormonal systems, especially the thyroid. And it's possible that you could have normal thyroid testing the way that most doctors do it and still have low thyroid, all right? So start thinking that you might have low thyroid, even if they've told you your blood testing is all normal. If you have a lot of cold intolerance, you have a lot of weight gain, dry skin, hair falling out, those are things that make me think of, and fatigue, those are things that make me think clinically that somebody might have a low thyroid, okay? And so if you have a lot of those symptoms, sometimes I will just put a person on thyroid medicine. The other thing I might do is do further testing about your thyroid. And I like to make sure a full thyroid panel is done that includes TSH, which is something called thyroid stimulating hormone. It's made by part of your brain that talks to your thyroid and says, make your stuff. Okay. I like to measure T4 thyroid and T3 thyroid. Those are two forms of thyroid made by your thyroid gland. And I also like to measure something called reverse T3. All right. Now, most doctors don't measure reverse T3. You actually have to ask them to do it. All right. All right. So what happens in your thyroid gland, which is up here, thyroid releases at least more than two, but the major two thyroid hormones it releases are called T3 and T4. About 90% is T4 and about 10% is T3. Okay. Now, both of those get into the blood, they go out to the tissues, and in the tissues, that T4 is converted into T3 through some enzymes. And what is active, which helps your cells metabolize and run correctly, is the T3. All right. Now, under stress, the body tries to go into hibernation. All right. And one thing that happens is all that T4, instead of going to T3, gets shunted over into something called reverse T3. And you can kind of think of reverse T3 as the brake. It's trying to slow the body's metabolism down to put somebody kind of in a hibernation state so that when the illness goes away, they can wake up and heal. So it tries slowing metabolism down as a form of protection. Okay. So when trying to figure out about thyroid and Lyme, you've also got to measure reverse T3. You've got to see if that's elevated, even if your TSH and your T4 levels and your T3 are normal. If you've got elevated reverse T3, then the treatment is to give T3 so that you're giving the active chemical that is needed by the cells to function. Okay. Now, it's a kind of a complex area, and I don't have enough time to go into all the complexities of it here, but there is a very detailed article I've written at Treat Lyme about thyroid and about the testing and about the things you should bring to your doctor. Bring my article to your doctors and say, help me, I think I may have this. Okay, so I would look for elevated reverse T3 and make sure that they're doing full labs on your thyroid, which includes a TSH, a free T4, a free T3, and reverse T3. Okay, all right. All right, number 3 cause of increased weight in Lyme can be the cytokines. All right. And specifically, cytokines can interfere with the brain's interaction with your fat cells. The brain, using a chemical called, interacting with a chemical called leptin that is made by fat cells, the brain actually sends signals to fat cells telling them to get small or to get big. Okay. And what happens is there is what is known as leptin dysregulation or leptin loss of regulation of your fat cell size when there is too many cytokines around. All right. So second thing you want to do is start lowering your cytokines. And the way to do that is kill your infections, get your germs out. Secondly, get on some curcumin. Okay. So there's two pieces of homework to do here. Number one, see if your doctors will do a detailed evaluation of your thyroid beyond even what endocrinologists usually do. You need to get to somebody that understands chronic illness that is willing to look at this idea of having elevated reverse T3. Okay, that's called peripheral low thyroid. All right, out in the tissues, low thyroid. Most doctors only pay attention to what goes on up here. They're not paying attention to what's going on out in the tissues, unfortunately. Okay, all right. And then the second thing is get on something to lower the cytokines. Okay, all right. So let me do a quick screen share here for you. The other thing you might want to take a look at that can help lower weight in a cytokine excess environment is to be on a paleo diet too. Okay, so I'm just going to go up here into my online Lyme guide. In terms of the paleo diet, take a look at, where is my chapter? There should be something I have. Yeah, take a look at my section on nutrition. And you want to take a look at this article called The Best Brain Inflammation, Pain, Energy, and Detox Diet Ever. That's my paleo diet that I recommend, okay? Second thing that you ought to take a look at is go and look at the hormone chapter. And although it's a kind of a complicated area, even if you don't understand it, print this article off and bring it to your doctors to have them help start looking for what is called peripheral hypothyroidism. That's not going to be picked up by the way they probably have checked your thyroid using just TSH and T4. They need to be measuring TSH, free T4, free T3, and reverse T3 to see if that is part of your problem. Okay? All right. Katerina, good luck to you. Thank you for that question, too. Let's see, I'll just take this one real quick. So Katerina has a second question. Good evening, Dr. Ross. What is your take on biomagnetism as a treatment for Lyme and co-infections? The method was developed by Dr. Guise in Mexico. Actually, I don't know. I haven't used it before. Generally, as I've worked with electromagnetic frequencies to treat Lyme or biomagnetism, these are things I just generally find don't work as well as doing herbal or prescription germ killers, okay? But I don't know the specific technique that he's doing, all right? Hello, Lisa. Let's see. Hi, diagnosed with Lyme, Babesia, probable Bart, and Sjögren's syndrome. Tried various oral antibiotics, some Zang herbs, cemento, banderol for a very long time, and finally a Dapsone protocol. Still symptomatic after all this. What do you think I should try next? Is there a certain must-try regimens or an order in which to treat patients? Lisa, unfortunately, I would need to know a lot more about you, what happened when you tried different things, etc. And that's one thing. Okay, I'll come back to that in a minute. One thing, just to make sure that somewhere in here, one thing I find when people are not getting better is that the Lyme germ will have created injury. And one of the things that can get injured when you have chronic Lyme for some time is you can have injury of what are called your mitochondria. Mitochondria are the energy factories found in every one of your cells. By some estimates, we have 300 to 400 mitochondria per cell. Inside mitochondria, sugar and fat are burned through a bunch of chemical reactions to create a cell fuel, which is called ATP. Okay. Now, when you have chronic infections or you have mold toxin illness, one thing that happens is there is an overproduction of oxidizing agents in the body. And those oxidizing agents can damage fat membranes. The covering of your mitochondria is a double layer of fat. Okay, so it can get damaged. And if it gets damaged, there can be inadequate uptake of sugar and fat to the inside where they're supposed to be burned into cell fuel. Okay. Secondly, there's a lot of electrons that are needed as part of some of the cycle that creates this cell fuel. And those electrons have to be donated by the healthy covering. And if it's damaged, it can't donate the electrons. So you get sluggish energy production, okay? Now, if you have sluggish energy production, that means your immune system doesn't work right. That means your nerves don't work right. That means you can hurt all over. There's good studies starting to show that chronic pain, one of the reasons people have chronic pain is from mitochondria injury. Okay. So you get just general body dysfunction if the cells don't have enough energy. All right. So when I see a picture where somebody's been through a lot of trials and nothing really has worked out, well, one of the things I will try to do as part of my next steps is to spend time repairing mitochondria. And the way I like to do that is get on the paleo diet I showed you just a few minutes ago. Okay, my best brain, my best inflammation detox diet ever, whatever I call that. Okay, look at my nutrition chapter for that. All right, because that supports your mitochondria. Okay. Number two, repair the membranes of the mitochondria. And what I like to use to do that is a product called NT Factor Energy that is made up of the fats that make up those mitochondria. And I'll start people at 2 pills 3 times a day for 2 months. And then after 2 months, I decrease it down to 1 pill 3 times a day for an additional 4 months. Okay. Now, there's some studies showing that just doing that, the NT factor, and people that have a lot of ongoing fatigue problems, just doing the NT factor by 2 months, there's average energy improvements of 40%. Okay, there's been a couple studies that have shown that. The people enrolled in these studies, though, to be clear, were people that reported fatigue. They didn't say what the cause of their fatigue was. Now, in my clinical practice, I have seen that improvements of about 40% of my patients with Lyme. Okay. Number two, get on glutathione. So you've got to decrease the oxidizing damage by being on a good antioxidant. Okay. So glutathione, I like to have people do the Tri-Fortify product I mentioned earlier, liposomal glutathione, and that's 5 milliliters 1 time a day. Right. Number three, be on CoQ10. CoQ10 helps carry electrons around your mitochondria. Okay. And I like using 400 milligrams twice a day. I prefer, I have good success using a research nutritionals product for that. Okay. All right. Number four, if you are not eating red meat at least once or twice a week, consider getting on something called carnitine or acetyl L-carnitine. All right, so carnitine is a protein that is found in red meat that is used by mitochondria to transport fat from the outside to the inside. And if you're vegetarian or you just don't eat enough of the red meat, which is less than once or twice a week, then you don't have enough carnitine to bring your fuel into the mitochondria. Okay, all right. So that I usually start people at 500 milligrams twice a day, and then after a month, I decrease it to 500 milligram 1 time a day. Okay, so my mitochondria repair formula is NT factor, glutathione, coenzyme Q10, and then also acetyl L-carnitine if you're not a meat eater, a red meat eater. Okay. All right. Now, it used to be until this month that I would have said, sign up for one of my online consults. I was doing visits with people that I would give you advice, and it's information you could take back to your doctor or use on your own. Unfortunately, many of you are aware, my medical board has been creating craziness for me here. And so I'm in the process actually of leaving Washington State, and I'm relocating my Treat Lyme website as well as my Marty Ross MD supplements site to Austin, Texas, actually this weekend. I'm moving everything down there. And when I get to Austin for the short term, I am not licensed there. Okay. And so I can no longer do the one-to-one consults because they would call that practicing medicine without a license. In Texas, though, as I interpret the law, I still will be able to run my supplement store. I'll still be able to keep giving great information in these webinars. And I'm still going to be able to keep writing books and publishing information about Lyme disease. And I plan on doing that while I still try to figure out what they're doing with my license up here in Washington State. Okay. So because of that, I'm no longer able to do the consults. And for those of you that have been purchasing from me for Marty Ross MD supplements, keep doing it. The store is going to stay alive. I'm just moving location of it. In fact, to people that live on the East Coast, it's going to in the South and even the Midwest, it's going to be a lot more accessible. Things will get to you a lot quicker out of Texas than they have from Seattle, Washington. I also have good transport times getting things out to the West Coast as well too. All right. All right, so I'd appreciate if you keep using my business if you have done that before too, as I go through this transition too. All right, all right. Good luck to you, Lisa. All right, let's see here. Hello, Sandra. Let's see. Thank you for your help. My question is, how do I discern menopause from Lyme from hypothyroid? Let's see. I was diagnosed with Lyme, band 4123 a few years back, and I had a couple years of antibiotics. I thought it was doing better, but most recently, the last few months, I've developed higher blood pressure, changes in my BPM, with my heart racing in the first part of my cycle. I am in menopause. I don't know what I am supposed to treat. It's been difficult, and I don't want to treat everything while not knowing what the real root cause is. Do you have any advice for what to treat at this point? I only take 25 milligrams metoprolol for the changing heart rate, first part of the cycle, and I take 100 milligrams minocycline for some tingling, burning sensations. I was told that my hypothyroid is very mild and I don't have to treat it yet, but perhaps it's causing the most symptoms. Any tips are appreciated, as doctors just send me from one specialist to another. Thank you. Boy, this is one. I hate to say this. I'm not going to be able to give you good advice because I need to ask you a lot of questions. And again, I'm not doing those consult visits anymore. It could be any of the things you've mentioned here. It could be menopause. It could be low thyroid. It could be Lyme. But without knowing more of what's happening with you, it'd be hard for me to say which direction to go here. All right. So I apologize for that. All right. Thanks, Sandra. Hello, Heather. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. I've had severe pain in my face, teeth, jaw, and even tongue since July. It is looking to my doctors like trigeminal neuralgia. I do have Lyme and Bartonella, so it is possible the pain is from this and not trigeminal neuralgia. I also notice the pain flares if I eat too much heat. I've been on Doxy and Zithromax, Buner herbs, and Biocidin LSF since this pain started. Any thoughts? Can this be treated naturally? So it could be trigeminal neuralgia caused by Lyme. All right. So trigeminal neuralgia, there's a nerve called the trigeminal nerve up in this area that can get inflamed either with viruses or bacteria. Okay. And so it could be that it is inflammatory, triggered by the Lyme and the infections, basically, right? So number one, keep treating the infections. I like the Doxy Zithromax, seems reasonable here. That combination would take care of possible Bartonella that can infect the nerves. That combination would treat two forms of the Lyme germ: Lyme that lives inside of cells, and Lyme that and something called spirochete Lyme. The biocidin can support treating cyst forms of Lyme, as well as both the spirochete and intracellular forms as well too. I think that's a reasonable thing to do. The only other thing that you might want to do is to help repair nerve injury. All right. And what first step in that would be to decrease nerve inflammation. That's your curcumin, 500 milligrams 3 times a day. You might start also repairing the mitochondria. Things that nerves that are in pain also mean that their mitochondria has been injured too. So I would look at doing the NT factor I talked about, 500 milligrams, 2 pills 3 times a day for 2 months, then decrease it to 1 pill 3 times a day. Beyond the glutathione, as I mentioned, 5 milliliters of the Trifortify 1 time a day to repair damage. And then because antioxidant glutathione repairs nerve injury, all right. And then be on anti-inflammatories, the curcumin, all right. Now, if that doesn't work, the other thing you can do to change nerve pain is to chemical in your brain called GABA. So there's a group of receptors in our nerves called a GABA benzodiazepine receptor. Some of the things that conventional doctors would like to do is to block, to use chemicals that are GABA analogs, things that go to a GABA receptor, and those would be things like Lyrica or gabapentin. Okay, but you could also just raise GABA levels naturally. And the way you could do that is by taking something called L-theanine. L-theanine is a component of green tea, and in the brain, it is turned into the chemical called GABA. You can take anywhere from 100 milligrams 3 times a day up to 400 milligrams 3 times a day. And just keep in mind, as you get to higher doses, it can be sedating. It might make you tired. So I usually have people start at 1 pill 3 times a day. Okay, now if you try it, and the NT factor and the curcumin and the Trifortify glutathione, and things aren't getting better, then you may need to look at prescription germ killers while prescription anti-pain medicines that can, like a Lyrica or a gabapentin. Um, or the other thing you might even look at too, as I think about it, is one thing that can help nerve pain, particularly good nerve pain, is medicinal marijuana. And if you're looking for a natural thing to do, medicinal marijuana, either CBD oil or THC marijuana, can be quite useful for neurologic pain too. And that might be something you think about too. If you are not familiar with using medicinal marijuana, let me just do a quick screen share here. So you might want to take a look at my pain chapter. And there's my article on medical marijuana. Okay, I talked to you about the difference between THC and CBD. How do you go about getting these, and what's the right situation to use them, and even the doses and how do you take it. It's all broken down in that article. Okay, all right, and that could be quite good for nerve pain as well too. There's also some limited science that says that CBD and sorry, I'm trying to get back here. There is some limited science that says that CBD can actually kill Lyme. That's from petri dish experiments. I don't think it really does a good job all the way in humans, but it is great. CBD and or THC has good science behind it that shows that not in Lyme, but in other infections like HIV, for instance, that shows it can help with seizures and that it can help with nerve pain. Those are the areas where we do have some good science. Although the federal government here in the States has blocked marijuana research for years, there still is some science we have around the issues of pain management and nerve pain and even sleep that shows it can be very useful in those areas. Okay? All right. Good luck to you, Heather. All right. Listen, everyone, that's it for me for tonight. It's been great to be here with you again. At the beginning of the webinar tonight, I said that I would not be with you for 2 weeks. And the reason is I'm moving. I'm moving my businesses and my webinars and my Treat Lyme site and Marty Ross MD supplements are going on the road down to Austin, Texas. I'm moving out of Seattle, Washington to get away from my medical board. It's been, as many of you are aware, they've made life a little complicated to me for 4 years now, basically because I helped somebody that was dying, literally in hospice, dying from mold toxicity, illness, and Lyme recover. And they did not like the way that I did that after a pharmacist reported me for some of my prescribing habits, but it worked. So unfortunately, they don't want to look at that. So anyhow, I won't give you the details on that or bore you with the details, but realize that I'm moving on so I can keep doing all the other ways that I help you. I look forward to being back here again with everyone in 3 weeks. Okay. In the meantime, if you need Lyme information, take a look at Treat Lyme. Also, again, if you're looking for a book about how do you treat the different infections, what herbs, what prescriptions do you use, take a look at my book page and consider buying the Anti-Germ Action Plans book that I now have available at Amazon and also as a PDF download at the Treat Lyme site as well too. All right. I'll look for an email from me tomorrow morning, somewhere around 7:30 in the morning, that will have links to the recording of tonight's webinar. I've had a great time visiting with everyone here and look forward to visiting with you from Texas in the future. All right. Good night, everyone.